Welcome to this episode of Elevate Your Wealth, and I will be talking about my newest book. Okay, so I am very excited about this. It is 7 basic wealth strategies for a more rewarding and fulfilling life. So these are just draft copies, okay, but the draft copies are to be kept by myself, but the main copies will be on Amazon. There's a notebook version as well because you could take some notes. But I'll go through that. And as I said, really excited about this. I don't know why I'm very excited about this because I think I've done a few other things that I should be more excited about. But the book is actually one of the ones that I'm really, really excited about. So happy to share lots of that with you. So jumping into things, dedication. So this one is dedicated to my mother. And the other day I was speaking to a friend and they were like, oh, well, why not your father? I was like, look, I love my dad. But in terms of the most influence I've seen in terms of from business perspective and just seeing my mom work so hard as a young mother back then, definitely this one is for her. Like, I remember stories. I remember when I was younger, when I would get up and then look around and then mom is not around. I knew she was working hard in the poultry. So I would go walk down to the poultry, and then I didn't like going down to the poultry because it smelt, and obviously there were chickens there. But I had to go down because I just didn't want to be by myself at home. So I walked down there, and then mom would be there working, and then I would go in, and then chickens would always peck my legs. And I'll then tell mom that, oh, they're pecking my legs. She was like, peck them back. I was like, okay. So those were fun memories with mom. I saw her build a business from a very small, tiny room to something big. So this one is definitely dedicated to her. On there as well, dedicating a bit of it, I'll say a sub-dedication, if I can put it that way, but a sub-dedication to my sister who first told me I should write a book 10 years ago. This is my older sister. So thanks for the planting that seed in my head. And look, family, friends, clients, and anyone embarking on a financial journey, this one is for you. So grab your copy, read it. And I think one of the things with the book as well is I want to bring out new editions, and I definitely want the new editions to be a lot better. So please let me know if there's any feedback. Definitely happy to help or put things in there that are really, really relevant. So that is the dedication. In terms of the forward as well, so this was written by a very good friend and someone I look up to, Philip Cow. So you need to buy the book and see what he says in there. But thanks, Philip, for putting the time in and writing something nice about myself. Okay, chapter 1. So chapter 1, start with the end in mind. So the way I've written the book as well is very sequential, going back to just the way I think about things. So you always need to start with the end in mind. Sometimes you may not be able to picture that end in mind because, look, it's a long time and many things can happen over the period of time. So what I always tell people is you can at least think about in 10 years' time, what do you want? Lots of the things you might want may not even be closely visible or they might feel unattainable now, but just write it down, okay? So starting with the end in mind, what I've done with this and why it's a workbook as well as the sections for you to actually write stuff in, which is amazing. I think it just works out really good because you can definitely write some things in. And it's simple. What do you want to achieve? What do you want life to look like in 10 years, okay? What are the things you see yourself doing then? What are the things you see yourself doing with your family? And a few reasons I've put down there as to why 10 years. And one of them is I strongly believe in life balance, okay? And sometimes life balance means that you're tilting a lot more to one side than the other, okay? And what that means is, we look at wealth, health, relationships, and I feel if you tick all 3 of those boxes, life will be amazing. And why I say you can tilt to one side some of the time is, by the time you're in your early stages of your wealth building strategy, you probably have to tilt a lot more to the wealth building part and focus on that so you can have something in the future that actually helps you with your health and relationships. Okay, so I think one of the good things about this is I explain how you need to prioritize and how you need to balance that, okay? So for some people, it's like, okay, well, you're going to be working a lot on the wealth for the next few years, and then they can focus more on health and relationships. It doesn't mean you should ignore those things. Those things are very important as well. But having a 10-year vision, you can actually just divvy that up, for lack of a better way of balancing that. First 3 years, heavily invested in wealth. Next 3 years, heavily invested in health. The other 3 years, heavily invested in relationships, however you want to put it. But there's a balance, and you need to find that balance for yourself, okay? So in here, it talks about how that's important as well. And then a vision board is quite important. So look, I've always had a vision board. Well, not always. I've had a vision board for the last, I'll say, 7 years-ish, and I think it's just good because it just gives you a visual representation. So you need to make your own vision board. Okay, so in the book, we did something a little bit, we showed an example so you can know what that can look like, okay? In here as well, we've asked certain questions, okay? And these questions are to help you think about what you want for yourself in the next 10 years. And for people that don't like maths, don't worry, we've made it easier, okay? You can multiply by just a certain number, and then you would know, okay, based on today's dollars, taking account into inflation, what does that look like in 10 years? And then obviously you can work out how much you want. So I went through this exercise as well, which is good. So I feel you should be putting down a figure that kind of scares you, but excites you at the same time. And you may not have exactly the road map to get there, but that's why it's 10 years is a long time. I remember when I started doing 10-year goals about in 2013. Okay, so that was the first time I actually vividly remember writing 10-year goals. And when I look at the goals now, I was like, oh, I wasn't dreaming big enough. I didn't actually push myself to dream harder. So when you're writing this down, please push yourself and put something in that is, I said, excites you. Not unattainable, as long as people in the world are doing that now, but something that can really get you where you want to be in 10 years. So, like, one of the questions we ask is, how much weekly income do you want in your pocket after taxes in 10 years' time? What does that look like? You know, put that down, make that as clear as possible. There's space on there for you to answer the questions that I've posed, and I think those would just guide you. You know, another one is, where do you want to live? You know, is it a 3-bedroom house? Is that going to be in Vaucluse? Is that going to be in Double Bay? Is that going to be in Blacktown? Wherever you want, just put it down, okay? And, you know, one other thing as well is lifestyle. So I have a question here. Describe your desired lifestyle, okay? And the example I put there is 1 day off weekly for personal time, traveling with family for 2 weeks overseas, and 1 week locally each year, okay? So that's just the example I put in. When I was filling this out for myself, okay, I think I definitely want to work 4 days a week in 10 years time. And, you know, that 5th day should be spent on, you know, personal activities. You know, I've kind of narrowed it down. I'm like, okay, wait, first weekday off is spent on the activities that I love. So right now I'm trying to get into swimming, fitness, and golf, you know, so I still want to be doing those in 10 years time. You know, then the next week is spent with my kids. So just doing whatever we have to do. So that'll be a kids daddy day, whatever you want to call it at that point in time. And then another week will be spent with my partner. Hopefully we can both have a day off, and then kind of just relax and do whatever we want at that point in time. Hopefully the partner wants this as well. If not, it's just going to be me on that day. But those are things that you can put down there, you know, that actually just gives you good perspective on the future. So that's the first chapter. First chapter is really about you writing a bit. Second chapter is know your biases, okay? So one thing I found that holds lots of people back is just not really understanding how the biases are affecting them, okay? So in here, we've put in a few biases, but I'm just going to touch on 2 of them. So a few of these biases, some of them are emotional, some of them are cognitive biases. And in the book, I explain how for cognitive biases, it's just a blind spot or lack of understanding. That's why you have that bias. And the bias can be even unconscious. And then for emotional biases, a more ingrained bias where you can only mitigate that. You can't actually get rid of that. So, for example, one of the bias we will be talking about will be endowment bias. Okay, so endowment bias, I've seen this play a role in lots of people's lives and lots of clients that I sit down with, and I've seen that play a role in my life as well. So endowment bias is when you overvalue something because you have it. Okay, and that value you've given it is just because it's yours. Because if you were to put that in the market or someone else, you will not get that much value. Endowment bias can also work the other way. Okay, so you can undervalue something because you have it. So it's definitely being conscious of, okay, whatever you have at this point in time, are you undervaluing it? Are you overvaluing it? You can connect that to those three aspects: your wealth, your health, your relationships. Okay, so a real life example that I've put down here is you're trying to sell your house for way more than it's worth because you got memories. Okay, buyers don't really care about your memories. Price is right, and move on. Okay, you cannot time the market. As long as the reason for selling is logical, the market should give you a price. And I've seen this lots of times where people, to try and sell a family house, or just trying to sell an investment property that they've had, the first one or whatever it is, whatever endowment has been put on that, and they're asking an unreasonable price, just given the market. Okay, so that is an endowment bias, and there are ways to you actually fix that. So the questions around each aspect that I've put down for you to actually write, and answering just questions will help you uncover any unconscious bias you may have. And obviously, I've put in a few tips there as to what you can do to actually overcome that, because telling you have a problem and not telling you how you can fix it, I don't think that works very well. So, one of the ones around the wealth is how am I valuing my assets based on personal attachment rather than market value? And what impact does that have on my financial decisions? So going back to the house, okay, if you want to sell the house, but you've attached a price to it, how did you come up with that price? Is it because you don't want to lose money? And there's another bias for that, but I won't deviate too much from this one now. So, but you probably want to go with the market's price if you need to sell that as soon as possible. Question around relationships is how do my personal attachments influence my perception of my relationships, and what can I do to assess them more objectively? Okay, this is a very interesting one, because further down I then put a caveat that in terms of relationships, yes, you want to get an objective view. And look, I'm not a relationship expert by any chance, but these are questions that people need to kind of answer and then figure out by themselves, or get someone that can help. But it's like get an objective valuation. How to beat it is get an objective valuation. So get third-party approvals. Bear with me, I'm going somewhere. Or compare market values. A huge note here is please don't compare market value for something like your partner or relationships. Or you're running split times with someone else. Those are very specific to you, and you can work on improving them versus trying to just compare. So I think that's very, very important when you're trying to deal with endowment bias, especially in relationships. In terms of, obviously, when you're looking at ways to reduce an endowment bias, as I said, it's an emotional bias. So you can actually just reduce it. You can't actually get rid of that. And one of the things with biases, or just anything, is a work in progress. We all still have biases. I still have biases at this point in time, even though I know all these things, but I'm slowly improving them every time. Okay. So endowment bias was one. Another interesting one is anchoring bias. Okay. So anchoring bias is a cognitive bias, and this is where individuals rely too heavily on an initial piece of information. So they're anchored to that information, okay? And a real-life example is the first price you hear during salary negotiations becomes your anchor, even if it's low. Push past it and aim higher, you're worth it. So, it's sometimes people do this consciously or unconsciously. I don't think it's pointing the finger at the other person doing it, but it's you just being conscious of that. Like if you're walking into a salary negotiation and you've given you a price and you know you're well worth that price, don't even think about that price. You can literally say, nope, we shouldn't consider that. Let's move on to something higher. So that way you're not anchored to that lower amount. So questions you can ask yourself. So on the wealth part, how are my financial decisions being influenced by initial information? And how can I gather more data to make better choices? Okay. On the health part is how is my fitness plan or diet influenced by the first advice I received? And what other options should I consider? So those are biases that we all have. And it's good to push past that. So how can you beat that? So you gather more information. You try to be as objective as possible, or contradictory to what you believe. Get all information because you might get a clearer view on things. And then you always adjust and adapt. So be flexible, open to new information. Always ask, why do you want a certain price for a certain asset, or why are you doing a certain action? Okay. So biases, there are about 8 of them with the questions. So I think it's a very interactive workbook, which, just helps you uncover a lot. Main thing about the biases that I'll flag again is, it's a work in progress. Some of these things you just can't get rid of it because you can't fully get rid of it, but you can reduce it because it's just the way you've been for a very long time. Work on this with, I'll say, self-care and awareness that, some of it is just a work in progress. Okay. Next chapter, chapter 3, cash flow. So I love cash flow. I think it's the foundation for building wealth and very important. So most people need to really understand your cash flow. A better name, you can call it your spending plan. Because when I help people with cash flow, I always tell them, look, you put the money there, it's still your money and you get to spend that. Just choosing when to spend it and how to spend it can mean a better lifestyle for you. And just means that you're not disadvantaging your future self if you're spending too much now. So we have the personal cash flow. We have a few buckets there. And one of the key things I stress in terms of the cash flow is always use percentages. Obviously, you narrow that down with dollar values after using percentages. But percentages just help in case if there is a salary increase, or if something happens and things have scaled back as to what you're earning. Percentages just help maintain a certain living standard and still ensures you're saving and investing. With personal cash flow as well, I feel if you have more than 5 accounts, 4 to 5 accounts, it becomes more of a chore and becomes a little bit tedious for you to manage your money. So you can have the 4 or 5 accounts that you name and then understand what you used for, okay? So the classic ones is your long-term account, your short to medium-term account, your discretionary account, your bills account, and then your emergency funds. And then you can link your travel to maybe your short-term or your discretionary, whatever you want to do in that regard, and then just work with that. Because if you have too many accounts, it gets tedious. It takes almost the fun away from things. But one thing I stress as well, ensure you have your discretionary account. Ensure you are spending something for yourself and no strings attached. No one should tell you how you should spend that money, but obviously choose a percentage and work with that. Do not choose to spend 50% on whatever you want every time. That will be a little bit too much. So in there, I've given guidance as to the different percentages, how you can think of things, and how that impacts you long term. So a few tips as well. So I've come up with a few names for your discretionary accounts. I think this is the fun part. So, you can definitely name your account, and I think it's important to name them. So a few names is the Dream Fund, Treat Yourself account, Splurge Stash, YOLO Yields, Fund. So many names that you can put on there. And I think it helps if you attach that to a goal. You might want to travel in 2 years' time and you really want to save for that. Call that whatever you want to, wherever you want to go or whatever you want to do. You might call that Europe 2027, something like that. It actually gives you that emotional advantage when you're saving, and then you really push through. A few other tips as well: automate your savings plan, automate your spending plan, ensure the accounts, the money goes into each account in a very automatic fashion, so you don't need to worry about that. And another good tip as well is get an accountability mate. So get someone that can actually hold you accountable. You can hold them accountable. If it's mutually beneficial, that's even better. So that's a huge tip as well for personal cash flow. Now, business cash flow. So business cash flow, business spending plan is another thing that I really love helping clients with. And generally, it's just ensuring that, look, you're putting taxes away consistently. You have an account as your tax account. You do not touch it for anything else other than taxes. You have your profits account. As a business owner, you're running the business so you can be profitable. What you then choose to do with that profit is up to you. So I feel you should definitely have profit for purpose. So whatever you want to do with that, be it giving back to the community, be it ensuring you can then have a more rewarding and fulfilling life for yourself, or helping team members, whatever it is, you should always allocate something to profits, and that can be a percentage. What is the average construction business? What is the profit margin? So you as a business owner, you should strive towards that average. You should even strive past that average, but obviously you need to deliver a good service for that. So factoring that into the cash flow is very, very important as well. And other things like your bills account, owner's capital, workers' capital are well discussed in this as well. Okay, cash flow. That is it with cash flow. The next interesting chapter is investing. So that is chapter 4. The art and science of investing. It is an art and it is a science. So you definitely have to understand that it's not just sequential. It's not just about numbers. There is an emotional and a path there that you need to really consider. Okay, so each chapter is a strategy in itself. So the fourth chapter, which is the fourth strategy, start investing now. Even if it's $10 a week, don't stop and don't stock pick. Start now. So to me, that is very simple. Even if you can put $10 a week away, do it, invest, and keep doing that, for as long as you can. Not for people having so much money on your deathbed, because you want to enjoy life. So there's a point where you can stop investing and actually start spending. Generally, most people, that's in your 40s or 50s. If you've really done well for yourself, you can do that in your 30s. But for most people, it's 50s or 60s. So the whole concept about investing, and you probably hear me say this lots of times, is your human capital, your ability to work, your ability to earn money. That is in here for most people, or that's in your hands, or, whatever you do. So over time, you need to move that human capital to financial capital. And then this chapter really deals with helping you invest your financial capital. Where should you be putting that money? How should you think about it? So with that as well, what I did was, first of all, explain different asset classes. So all the way from defensive assets, where you have your cash, your bonds, your annuities, your fixed interest, to your growth assets, where you have property, infrastructure, equities. I also talked a little bit about digital assets, which is good because then gives you an understanding. And this is just my view on that. My strong view on digital assets is the blockchain technology that is really behind these assets, not really the asset itself. Some of them have then used the blockchain technology to create a then valuable digital asset. Okay, but what comes first is the blockchain, the ability to decentralize checks and balances. Okay, so I talked a bit about there as well, which is interesting, because I think for people to know what kind of investments you're doing and really understand if this is a good decision or not, you need to kind of have a broad picture of how these assets work. For example, if you're going into defensive assets and then it's giving you 10% plus cash rate, there's a high risk in that. That is not a defensive asset again. So that may be along the lines of private credit, private debt. Okay, so there's a huge risk involved in that. So that would not fall under your classic defensive assets, but would be under your growth assets. So on that, all that is there as well. Just gives you a brief understanding and perspective of things. I know when I sit down with clients, this is what we always do as well. I explain asset classes so they fully understand what asset classes mean, how to think about it, and then we can drill down into certain investments that they have. In terms of private equity, which I think is a very interesting one for people to understand. Most ultra high net worth and high net worth people have made money from generally, and the stat says about 85% of them have made money from private equity. And private equity, to kind of make it as simple as possible, is just being able to invest in a small business that can grow, because most businesses started small before they grew, and then that's how people made wealth in that. So there was a section here on private equity and just explain different types of that. There's an example of if you're to invest in someone's small business, what are the questions to ask, or rather, what are the things you should think about, which I think is very important and valuable as well. Okay, so uh, quite a few sections to talk about. I think one of the other things I'll just zone in terms of chapter 4 is comparative advantage. Okay. So, and I've spoken about this in previous podcasts as well, but comparative advantage is using your skills to create more wealth for yourself and actually trying to go into something else, and I'll use an example of a surgeon. A surgeon shouldn't be learning to invest. They should actually get someone that actually helps them invest their money versus, okay, trying to go pick a stock yourself because, you've heard of this new technology, it helps with surgeons. That is not the best use of your time. Your time is best given to surgery or having surgical procedures on people, because that is your comparative advantage. Okay, so zoned in on that as well. And I think it's good for people to understand that, because when people have great dreams, or rather big dreams, but you're not using the time as effectively as possible in the aspect that can get them that, then they're not doing the best they can. So that is another part which I zoned in on. A bit about ETFs, a little bit about managed funds. But I will skip it through to chapter 5 now. So chapter 5 is where I talk about personal protection. Okay. So with personal protection as well, lots of misconceptions about, protection and the industry, and obviously why they should have it, if they believe in it or not. And, my reasoning, or rather my opinion, it's a no-brainer, for someone that is working to earn and working to live and working to do everything you can. If you cannot work, you don't want your living standard to drop dramatically. Yes, it will be a tight situation where you cannot earn money, but your protection out there that can actually ensure you're getting at least 70% of what you would have been earning. So to me, it's a no-brainer with that. By the time you factor in people with families as well, with young ones, if something unfortunate was to happen and you need to pass, what's going to happen to the young one? Do they have enough to give them at least some form of a decent life as to what you've planned for them? So things like life insurance are very important as well. I think one of my ideas with writing the book as well is to give people the knowledge to be able to choose a good provider by themselves. Having said that, you're not using comparative advantage. And, when I was writing this, is not even scratching the surface as to how we actually help as financial planners, but it still gives you a good guide. Okay, so the questions here as to, okay, do you need life insurance? What are the questions you should think about as to, okay, choosing to have life insurance or not? And also, we then talk about the kind of, I'll say, 6 different types of protection. So you have your life insurance, your total and permanent disability, you have your trauma insurance, you have your income protection, and then you have your buy-sell insurances as well. Then you have your key person. Okay, so all those are the types of personal protection to consider, and all those have questions to help you get to if you need it, and if you don't need it, then you move on to the other one. So key things as well. When I sit down with people, the value I bring to them for getting them the right protection is giving them the right structure, choosing the right insurer for them, and then what amount should they be covered for. So in here as well, I've kind of given a few questions and guidances if you want to do that yourself. I strongly suggest not doing that yourself. But look, to feed your curiosity, or anyone that has the curiosity, that is there for you. Okay. Moving on to chapter 6. Okay, so chapter 6 is when I talk about building wealth. Okay, and building wealth with or without strategic debt. Okay. So the key thing in this chapter is really looking at what kind of debt are you using? Okay. And I give a few examples on there as well as to how that can help. I think the main thing as well is what's your goal? Okay. How can you get to your goal, especially in terms of investing? And also choosing the right risk profile given a certain time frame that you want. Because if you're going to be investing for 5 years for a better lifestyle, you should not be taking the same level of risk as if you were to be investing for 25 years for a kid. Okay. So those are the key things that you should consider in there as well. I said in there, you have a few investments. You have a few examples as well, which just really helps you get to what you should be doing. I said we did mention a few providers, but look, this is not advice, just flagging that. It just gives you context as to, what we think about when we're choosing setting providers. Okay, chapter 7, okay, which is the last official chapter. And chapter 7 really talks about super retirement and, ensuring you're securing your future. So for most people that have a decent job and, they're going to be working for the rest of your lives, and I'll say early 20s, early 30s now, you're probably going to have a decent superannuation account, if you don't take too much time off work. But it's still good to look at a few things that can boost that for you. Okay. So one of the things I look at is, okay, if someone had 35 years to retirement and then they were then they were getting 1% more, what does that look like in value? Okay. And we've done the maths there. So it really gives you context as to, okay, what can an extra 1% do over 35 years? It can do a lot. So definitely worth using, getting providers that work well, and you're not paying too much fees on that as well. I also talked about the First Home Super Saver Scheme. So this is for people in your early 20s, early 30s that haven't bought your first house as well. Generally, most people, you would buy a house to live in. So using the First Home Super Saver Scheme can be a good way to actually save for that first house, okay? And the earlier you do it, the better, okay? Because if you do it early, you get lots of the benefits from doing that nice and early. Okay, so skipping through to transition to retirement and just helping people that are 5 years away from retirement. Okay, what should you be doing? Giving examples there as to what that looks like. Why do people use transition to retirement? The key features of that is access to super, helping you save a little bit of taxes, and, just ensuring that you're boosting the overall balance you have. So that works really well for people in the preservation age, okay? So examples there just to help you and guide you with that. And with all these things as well, is really giving people context as to what we do, how we help people as well. And if you want to do it yourself because you don't want to use an advisor, that's great. You can read through and sort out what strategies you have to use that for. But I always talk about, look, these are strategies that may not work for everyone just because everyone's personal situation is a little bit different. Okay, but there are strategies there. In here as well, I talk about when you start drawing down from your super, how there's an extra $10,000, and this is for someone that's taking $120,000 a year. If you're taking 120 versus 130, what does that look like? Do you run out of money a lot sooner? Yes, you do. We've done all that calculation and the maths there for you. So what else can you do? How else can you balance things out to ensure you don't run out of money? And, the final part we talk about that super or post-retirement is aged care as well. So, unfortunately, most people will go to an aged care facility as soon as they get to their latter stages of life. So just ensuring you've thought about that. You're in a situation where you can actually take care of yourself. So that's very important. Getting good advice around that can mean saving thousands of dollars on that, and also getting lots of government support. So, okay. And I did the bonus chapter. Yes, you need to give something. You need to give a bonus back every now and again. So the bonus chapter is just how do you build $1 million in assets in 15 years on an average income? So we did a little bit of maths there. But, to give you a highlight on that is investing using some property. and then using some debt as well. Okay, so all that is possible to actually get to $1 million invested. One of the key things there that I kind of zoned in on is, that balance. Okay, so you need to be putting a certain amount of money away. If you have family or if you have a loved one, is that what you people want? Do people want to do people want the first 15 years to be less spending, and then you get to this $1 million and then you spend a lot more? Is it better of balancing that out? So those are conversations you need to have. Some people want to build that. They want to live frugally for the first 15 years and then have enough money. That's perfect. Some people don't. So it's, what do you want? It's not what Mr. and Mrs. Jones are doing down the road, but is what you want for yourself and your family. So that's a key thing to actually think about. Because if you build that $1 million and then your health really suffers because of that, well, you really haven't balanced things, or your relationship suffers because of that. So it's ensuring that there is balance with that. Okay, so that is the book in a nutshell. Okay, I tried to make that as simple as it can be. Okay, and at the back of that as well, there's about the author, which is myself, and this was written by Lan Ta, who is founder and director of Chick Buyers Agent, so buyers agent that I work closely with. So thanks a lot, Lan, for writing that and telling viewers about myself. So please read that section and get to know a little bit more about me. 7 Basic Wealth Strategies for More Rewarding and Fulfilling Life is going to be out on Amazon. Okay, you can also get a workbook copy. The link will be available. Comes out on the 21st of October. Get your copy and happy reading.